Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the first day of convention. Welcome to NSBE47 and to our program, COVID-19, Innovation, Patients, and Community Impact, brought to you by Pfizer and the Healthcare Innovation Special Interest Group. I'm Arthur Edge, and I have the pleasure of serving as the director of HiSig. We're really excited to have you here today and just want to start out by thanking you and offering you a little bit of sustenance. We know it's always hard to fit these programs in during the day. So please take advantage of Uber Eats vouchers on us. They are available to the first individuals who join the program and can be used um, for meals anytime today. So you can use it for lunch or later today, but please note that they will expire at the end of the day. Also, a couple of housekeeping items. The chat feature and the Q&A feature will be key assets for you during the program today. You can use the chat feature to have comments. If you're enjoying the program, want to send positive vibes to the speakers, feel free to put those in the chat. Or if you're having any tech challenges, you can let us know there, and please address those to all of the panelists and attendees, and we can help to troubleshoot for you. But if you have questions for the panel or for any of the NSBE leaders who are host and co-host, please use the Q&A button. Please save those questions to the end, as we'll have plenty of time for questions. But if there's a burning desire or you think you might forget, you can place those in the Q&A at any time. And I'd also like to let you know we're going to have a polling game that will come quickly following the presentations. You'll be able to access that via the QR code here or via the link that's shown. It's on a platform called Poll Everywhere, which folks might be familiar with. And you will win points for being the fastest finger and having the correct answer. We're also dropping these links in the chat so that you can easily access. But don't fear if you're not able to jump in right now, because we'll bring this back to you later in the program. I'd like to share a little bit about HiSig for those who might not be familiar. We are, again, the Healthcare Innovation Special Interest Group in NSBE, one of 11. And our vision really is to be a trusted ecosystem that provides solutions to the challenges that impact the Black community. We also have a mission that is near and dear and true to the work that we do, but we execute that mission across the care strategy. And that care strategy has a couple of components. It starts with connecting individuals across industry, academia, and government to do one of three things. You can advance, specifically creating technologies, whether at the research, development, or commercialization stages. You can recruit and retain, participating in our workforce development programs. And last but not least, you can help us with education and exposure, educating the Black community about healthcare disparities and exposing them to the careers and innovations that can work to address those. Astute followers of HiSig will know that we do programming across the US and abroad, and we're continuing to build ecosystems in major healthcare hubs. And you might be in one of those hubs today. And our partner for the program, Pfizer, most certainly is in several of those hubs. And so it's really aligned to the work that we do to partner with them today. So that brings us to a quick preview of our speakers for today. We have Dr. Dara Richardson-Heron, she's the Chief Patient Officer at Pfizer and has spent over 25 years working in the field across academic, government, and nonprofit and for-profit sectors. She's now, of course, at Pfizer as the Chief Patient Officer and leads the company's work to advance patient-focused programs and platforms. And the goal really for her is better responding to patients and communities' needs with a focus on reducing healthcare disparities. You'll also hear briefly from a few other special guests. James Jing, he's Director of Temperature Control Logistics at Pfizer within their global supply chain area. And he leads many efforts as a technical subject matter expert, leading teams of engineers responsible for designing and implementing logistics capabilities and distribution. He's been at Pfizer since 2016. You'll also hear from Mona, who is the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Leader at Pfizer, and she leads all diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies within the global supply, finance, and business operations orgs. She's been with Pfizer since 2006. And last but not least, from Mr. Sean, who is the Vice President of Pfizer Digital. Specifically, it's an organization responsible for learning and development worldwide, and he heads up those efforts and has also had a long tenure at Pfizer since 2003. So you'll see we have esteemed guests here who are really, really excited to share with you. And I will now pass the mic to Mona, who will talk about who Pfizer is.
Thank you so much, Arthur, and thank you, NSBE members. Is there an echo?
Yes, I hear the echo.
Yes, Mona, there's an echo.
Can another speaker speak just a
Mona, you're good now.
Is everyone on mute?
You're good
I'm
now.
good. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, NSBE members, and welcome to our second engagement with the NSBE HiSig organization. My name is Mona Bovary, and I'm the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Lead responsible for the Pfizer Global Supply, Finance, and Global Business Solutions organization. I'm excited to be kicking off this discussion today with leaders at Pfizer covering COVID-19 innovation, patients, and community impact. And as Arthur mentioned, at the end of the presentation, there's going to be a game to test your knowledge. Participants will have the opportunity to win a meeting with a senior leader at Pfizer. And lastly, we have several guest leaders from our R&D, Pfizer Global Supply, and government relations organizations here for a robust and engaging Q&A panel after the presentation. Next slide, please. Pfizer's purpose, breakthroughs that change patients' lives, fuels everything we do and reflects both our passion for science and our commitment to patients. We are thrilled our COVID-19 vaccine has the potential to change more lives than any other breakthrough from the past century. And we're just as proud of our other breakthroughs, big and small, that deliver meaningful value to patients and society. Now, to the outside world, it may have appeared that COVID-19 was the only thing we were working on in 2020, but that couldn't be further from the truth. And while we invested significant time, resources, and brain power to find medical solutions to the pandemic, tens of thousands of Pfizer colleagues continue to advance equally important work across all of our therapeutic areas, recognizing that the needs of those suffering from other diseases were no less urgent. Next slide. Our bold move number 2 goal is to deliver first-in-class science by sourcing the best science in the world, doubling our innovation success rate and bringing medicines to the world faster to enrich and extend life across all disease areas. So over the past year alone, about 86 million people were immunized by our vaccines. 4.4 million people were treated with our cancer therapies. 58 million people were treated for cardiovascular and metabolic conditions. 80 million people treated for pain. 2.5 million people used our smoking cessation treatments. 28 million people were treated with anti-infectives. 12,400 patients treated for rare diseases, and 1 million patients were treated for inflammatory disease. Next slide. We accomplished this with a global footprint of 78,500 colleagues across more than 125 countries where Pfizer sells products and in over 40 manufacturing sites around the world. Our colleagues are our #1 asset, and I'm excited to share with you just one of our colleague stories about the impact of Pfizer's purpose on her personally. Take a listen to Caitlin Perkins' story.
Similar to many families, it truly took a village to raise me. For the first few years of my life, I lived with my Aunt Lane and my Uncle Clarence, whom I call T, and they were the ones that really shaped me into the woman that I am today. And when this pandemic first started, my family and I, we took it seriously, but we didn't realize just how much we would be impacted until July 2020, when we received news that both my aunt and my uncle had tested positive for COVID. They wore their mask in public and socially distanced as much as possible, so we were a bit on edge throughout this whole process. And my aunt at first showed a lot of the symptoms. She was coughing and fatigue, and it was my uncle who seemed to be doing okay at first. And I remember calling him and telling him just how happy I was working on the manufacturing floor as a process engineer. And he was like, "Baby, I'm just so proud of you, all the things that you're doing, but I'm tired. I'm gonna go lie down now." And that was my last phone call with him, because within a few days he was rushed to the hospital because he was having trouble breathing. And we were told that he would, be home soon, and we were excited because my uncle, he always made it through things, from the heart attacks that he had to the stroke, and he just made it through. We were like, he was going to make it through this. And his health just took a turn for the worse. He developed pneumonia, and on August 9th, we all said our goodbyes through our phones and laptop screens, and saying goodbye to the man that raised me, who took me prom dress shopping, who took me to tour NC State, my now alma mater. That was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. But I'm just so thankful for Pfizer's dedication to science during this time, and just all of the employees working hard on this vaccine, because in January of this year, my aunt called me and told me that she received our vaccine, and I was just overwhelmed. I cried and was also filled with a lot of joy, because I knew that this gave her that extra protection and safety that she needed just to feel comfortable going to the grocery store. And this picture here is of my uncle and I on my graduation day. And I'm convinced he was happier than I was that I received this degree. I keep this as a reminder to just keep going, keep working hard, keep striving, because the work that I do at Pfizer every day, it matters, and I'm just so Pfizer proud to just truly feel like I'm saving lives when I go into work. I'm part of, greater community and a team of people just working to deliver therapeutics to the world, and I don't know what's better than that. So I'm just truly grateful. I ask that everyone please continue to follow CDC guidelines, wear your mask, and protect others as much as possible by socially distancing. And with your loved ones, cherish them. Love on them, because life truly is short. Thank you.
Wow, truly inspiring. Apologies, everyone. I didn't think I would respond as emotionally as I am. I also lost a loved one during the time of COVID, but while it wasn't for COVID, share some of the pain that the Caitlin experienced in terms of just being able to say goodbye to a loved one during this time. So I'm going to go into the presentation now. Just again, sharing just some of the parts that I've been privileged to take part in developing this vaccine. Again, apologies everyone, I didn't think I would be this emotional. So my name is James Jean. I am the Director of Global Temperature Control Logistics for Pfizer. Before I go into the presentation, I'd like to just tell a little bit about who I am. We get asked about this quite often at Pfizer. We don't want to just know what you do, but just tell us, who are you? And who am I? I am a father. I was born in Haiti, and I moved to the United States very early at the age of 9. I grew up in the streets of Philadelphia. I have 3 amazing, what I consider to be probably the best and the most beautiful kids in the world. Even though it's been challenging during the COVID lockdown period, but what I have to say is one of the positives that came out of being in a COVID lockdown is that I was able to spend more time with my kids and my wife, of course, as well, but just to truly appreciate them more at this younger age than what I would have had the COVID lockdown not taken place. In terms of my professional career, I mentioned my current title, and I luckily, as a result of just, I think, timing and also circumstances, I happen to be the lead for the distribution and transportation for the COVID vaccine. And I say that because honestly, when it comes to distribution, it's typically a very boring topic. we move the product, but with this vaccine with Pfizer, I'm sure everyone has seen some of the articles, and we'll get into some of that in the presentation. Distributing the COVID vaccine has been one of the highest in terms of priorities in ensuring that every vaccine dose gets to patients equitably, but also in a quality and compliant manner. I started my career in pharma and R&D in the clinical supplies division, working on clinical trials, first in human dosing, all the way up to post-marketed commitments. That basically means, first doses when we're testing drugs on patients, and then also testing such as for phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and the like. So that's really where I cut my teeth, if you will, in pharma, and then I moved over to the commercial side several years after getting into pharma, and I've been on commercial distribution since then. My work history includes Wyeth, Bristol Myers, Merck, and Sanofi, and again, mainly on the R&D, and then of course later in the commercial supply chain. In terms of my education, I did my MBA at St. Joe's University, and then I did my bachelor's at Ursinus College. Next slide, please. Actually, I'm sorry, before we go, can we go back just to one slide? I just want to make sure that I point out that on the right-hand side, these are the pictures of my beautiful family. Different ages only because honestly, this is really what I work for. This is what I strive for. My little ones are really the joy of my life, and my wife also just keeps me sane. And I just want to point out that I was successfully able to grow a COVID beard, even though I don't I don't have it anymore. But I just wanted to point out that those pictures are of my beautiful family. Thank you. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to talk about the distribution and transportation models with the Pfizer vaccine. But before I do that, I just want to just give some quick pieces of information on the vaccine for people who may not be familiar with it. So Pfizer and BioNTech, we jointly developed a COVID vaccine that is proven to be 95% effective in preventing COVID-19 disease. In the US and other markets, the vaccine has been approved under emergency use designation, but there are other regulatory designations in other parts of the world as well, throughout the world. Some fun facts about the Pfizer vaccine: it's an mRNA type vaccine. It's a 2-dose regimen administered day 1 and also day 21, so 21 days apart. It's a 6-dose multi-dose vial. It requires mixing with diluent. In terms of storing the product, it is a deep frozen product, meaning it's stored between -90 and -60 for up to 6 months. There are other short-term applications by which you can store the product at 2 to 8 and -15 and 25. Currently, I think it's 5 days for the 2 to 8 and -15 and 25 is 2 weeks. We are scheduled in the coming weeks to have some more data in terms of how to store the product. So it's a lot of good moves in terms of advancing and also giving point of use locations where they use the vaccine just more flexibility in how they store the product. Next slide, please. So when we set out to develop the distribution or the supply chain model for the COVID vaccine, there were no shortage of critics in terms of what was installed for us, right? Just giving everyone a quick background, when Pfizer and BioNTech first entered into discussions about the vaccine, distribution was absolutely at the top of concerns in terms of it's one thing to be able to manufacture this product, but given the storage requirements, distributing a -60 to -90 product was going to be very, very difficult. And this slide really just depicts just a few of the excerpts from articles that were written, just showcasing just the difficulty that Pfizer was going to have in terms of distributing this vaccine. This first note here, just indicating so many moving parts. A lot can go wrong. And again, it's because of the lack of infrastructure to be able to maintain -60 to -90. Coming off the manufacturing floor, storing it in manufacturing, and then also moving it to distribution locations, and then being able to transport it down to users. Currently, that infrastructure globally, whether it's at transportation locations, you name it, it didn't exist at the time. And so to go into this thinking that it was going to be an easy feat was never really on our minds. What we sought out to do was basically develop something that had never been done before. These things typically take, by the way, years to develop, and I'm not exaggerating. But to quote the words of my leadership, can't be done is not an option. Failure is not an option. And we have 6 to 8 months to basically develop a global end-to-end supply chain for deep frozen to move product equitably throughout the world. So this was the way we were going to save the world. If you look at the next bullet right there, it talks about the lack of infrastructure to support this type of capability. Waste was a significant concern, as you can see. And one of the quotes here, do you turn a patient away because you can't open the Pfizer box? And you're going to hear a lot in terms of the Pfizer box, equitable distribution. And what we realized is we weren't solving a problem just for how we distribute the product. We were solving a problem really for everything prior to the product getting into a patient's arm. So when we say end-to-end, we truly mean end-to-end before a vaccine actually gets administered to a patient. And the last bullet there, it's going to be very hard. I think there's going to be a steep learning curve, and the waste piece, right, keeps coming back up. Now, I want everyone to just kind of remember these things. Just again, the difficulty, the focus on waste, and also things going wrong, the learning curve. And these were articles, by the way, very early on. We were seeing questioning really everything we were doing in terms of developing the supply chain. And what was interesting in some of the articles and also some of the questions that came about to us in supply chain, some reporters, they really asked questions very, very upfront. They said, do you think this is something that could reasonably be done in this time? And when we get into this presentation, I'd really like to come back to that. So next slide, please. All right, so I talked about the complexity of being able to solve for a distribution down to a point of use location. What we decided to do at Pfizer as a result of the complexities and also everything that we do is science-based. What we opted to do was to develop a direct-to-shipment or direct-to-vaccination center model. And what this basically means is we want to actually ship the product to where the product will be administered. The reason for this, of course, is because we know that there's a lot that can go wrong in between from when it leaves our dock to when it basically arrives to the point of use. Now, that's the primary model that we use. And again, because of the risk that something can go wrong during the distribution and transportation process, we thought this was the safest model. Now, other providers, of course, have chosen other models, such as more of a centralized, you get it to a location and they basically manipulate it and then ship it out. We felt that the most conservative option would be to ensure that we have as much control of the product as we possibly can to when it arrives at the location where it needs to be used. And of course, we have quite a bit in terms of our compliance pieces that we put around it, both internally and externally. There are some other models that we use, where we sometimes will ship to a government location or a hybrid, non-standard, but for the most part, that direct to vaccination center, that's the primary model that we use. We have internal and external quality controls that we put in place, and they are quite extensive, and they're there by design. And we do that, again, so that we can ensure every single dose that goes out the door, that it meets those stringent quality requirements. Next slide, please. So not sure if people have seen in the news, our box has been somewhat of a star, and I have it behind me as well. And also, if you're curious, it is in the Smithsonian Institute, which it's not in this presentation, but I thought I'd put that out there as well. So our box has actually been featured at the White House in many different locations, and quite honestly, it was a bit of a shock to us as well. But it was really one of the first tangible pieces of the vaccine before the vaccine was actually launched, and I think that's why it gained so much popularity. And also for the fact that this box really did solve quite a bit of issues with how we were going to distribute the vaccine. I mentioned, waste. I mentioned, keeping product deep frozen during distribution transportation. Well, why does that matter? Well, the fact is we had to get out as much product as we possibly could, because we're in a pandemic, and we had to do so very, very quickly. And in doing so, what we've done is we basically have 195 vials that basically goes inside of one tray, and we can ship up to 5 of those trays. And again, recall I said that each of the vials are multi-dose. So currently one tray is about 1,200 doses. So it's upwards of 5,000 plus doses that we basically can fit inside of one of these boxes that I have behind me. And that's huge because when we thought about how we could get as much product as we could out the door, we needed to have not just a compliant means of getting it there, but also a way to be able to support those volumes. We first started off with the first one on the left, and then we also included the second one. While it may seem like an easy feat to do, the engineering required to develop a box that can support 10 days at the -60 to -90, that was actually a Herculean effort that we knew was going to be needed if we were going to do this equitable distribution globally. The other piece was ensuring that we can always know what the product is doing, temperature, shock, vibration, you name it. So we incorporated the use of these GPS-enabled devices. What was great about that was we were able to bring forward a capability that we were looking to really develop and implement over the next 2 to 3 years, but we brought it forward because this was really, the product that required it, that really needed it. And so what we're able to do is we're able to compliantly show for every dose that goes out the door, we know exactly what happened to that product, to those doses and the like. And that was really, again, just another fantastic capability that we were able to advance. And again, equitable access. I want everyone to remember that because that's at the forefront of what we were doing. We wanted to make sure that everyone, especially someone like me, who comes, from a low-income country, and also someone like me who grew up in the streets of North Philadelphia. Not sure if everyone is familiar with North Philadelphia, but the fact of the matter is, it's one thing to say that you've developed a vaccine that can get to, we'll say, higher income or more prominent areas, but it's another to say that you've developed the capabilities to really get it to, those remote locations. Next slide, please. So I talked about the end-to-end. This slide really just talks to kind of how we got here, really just adapting to our customer needs. I talked about the box. We first developed the box really to be a means of, again, ensuring that we can get product to anywhere around the world. And then it was quickly asked of us to see whether or not we can develop the box to become a storage device, because what we knew was that many locations, vaccine locations, just do not have deep frozen capabilities, meaning, the massive freezers that can store product at -60 to -90. So we worked with our engineers to develop a variant of the box where it could actually be used for storage at mass vaccination centers. That proved to be so successful in testing and the like that we realized that the maturity was really having this as a storage device capable of maintaining temperatures at vaccination sites, not just mass vaccination, but clinics, hospitals, you name it. And so therefore, we matured the solution to be able to hold temperatures anywhere, really, as long as they follow the guidelines that we put forward. Next slide, please. And this slide also speaks to the advancements just in our manufacturing capabilities. Our cycle time reduction. We went from around 54 down to 30 days in terms of lead time, which is, weeks, which is fantastic just in such a short period of time. The end-to-end yield from September 2020 to February 2021, our yields have increased dramatically. And then the last piece, I'm sure a lot of people have heard about this in the news, how Pfizer's vaccine went from being a 5-dose to a 6-dose. Well, that was as a result of many different advancements, one of which is utilizing what's known as a low dead space syringe. And really the 5-dose was with a standard syringe, and with these low dead space syringes, it really allows you to extract more product out of a vial than if you use the former. Next slide, please. As I stated before, in terms of equitable distribution, one other piece that I didn't mention was flexible storage options. What we've been able to do over time is mature the vaccine in terms of how it could be stored, managed, and transported. It's one thing to get product down to one location, but what we know is that hospitals share product. Clinics will move product from one location to another. But then also, again, we talked about utilizing the box, but we also know that we needed to have more stability data to allow different locations, different means of handling the product, especially very remote locations. So originally, the product could only be stored really at the -60 to -80, -90 temperature. But with the advancements in our science and technical capabilities, we've been able to allow the point of use locations to not only store the product at -60, -80, but -15 to -25 for 2 weeks. And then also, I mentioned the 2 to 8 at the 5 days. With the advancements of the -15 to -25, which is a standard freezer, just so that everyone understands, like a 2 to 8 is a standard refrigerator, -15 to -25 is a standard freezer versus having to have a deep frozen freezer. So this allowance really normalized our product for people or hospitals, clinics, different locations that needs to store the product for short term in their current capabilities. Next slide, please. So trying to bring a lot of this home because I mentioned that when we went into this process, there were a lot of questions as to whether or not Pfizer really knew what they were getting into. The fact that there was a lack of infrastructure, the fact that there was going to be so much waste, spoilage, steep learning curve and the like. So as of the 9th of March, and this is really dated, by the way, we've delivered vaccines to 76 countries. Over 7,000 now. I can, even though it's not reflected on this slide, I can tell you over 7,000 destinations. We've shipped over, again, slide says 57. I know it's well over that now, but 57,000 boxes, 167 million doses. And for what was supposed to be a disaster, right, for Pfizer in terms of distributing product or this COVID-19 vaccine, our success rate is 99.99%, meaning we've seen almost no loss in product at all. And then also we're getting product down to locations anywhere between 1 to 4 days and 98, sometimes even higher, 98%. And again, just wanting to bring that back to what was supposed to be an impossible situation and really driving home that when you're in a no-fail, can't lose situation and your leadership is really challenging you. And then also you heard Caitlin's story in terms of, what we're tasked with doing, the personal stories behind it. This vaccine truly was what we'll say is a work of just a lot of love and passion the long hours that were put in place to make sure that we deliver what we believe to be just a truly remarkable solution, vaccine capabilities, you name it. There's really no shortage of how we can describe it, but we never really saw a problem in terms of how to deliver this vaccine. We really just had to go out and figure out how it was going to be done. And this slide really just kind of mirrors what our expectations were, that we never really saw failure as an option. Next slide, please. I spoke about equitable distribution of the vaccine. What I wanted to showcase here, and this is an old slide, but I think it's still a very good slide. Getting to remote locations, again, was at the forefront of what we wanted to do, and doing so scientifically in a compliant manner. Nothing we do, by the way, is not supported by science. I want to make sure I put that up front. What we wanted to showcase here was one location, Malaysia, that again, getting to some of these remote villages and different locations, we wanted to showcase, of course, that we can get product to those locations, utilizing the capabilities that we developed. And I wanted to just share that not only were we able to get product to these locations, but we're doing so fantastically with no issues, getting the product. And you can see the pictures of just how well the world really receives, the vaccines, the capabilities that we put in place, and they really admire the fact that we do put, or we did, and still do put that equitable piece at the forefront. In fact, even the multi-dose variant of what we've developed was again with the equitable piece in mind, because we know that getting vaccines to certain locations, a single dose vial really wouldn't give us what it is that we're looking for. Next slide, please.
James, maybe one quick question before you do the next slide. You might be able to address what discoveries or changes enabled the storage to -20°C from -70°C?
So in terms of the technological development, it's a combination of what we were able to do with the thermal solution, the box that's behind me, right? But then also what we were able to do with our supply chain partners, both from a distribution and also from a transportation capability. So this particular slide speaks to, I'm sure everyone's familiar with FedEx, UPS, and the like, and DHL Medical Express. It was working with those partners to ensure that they could give us the turnaround time and then also the controls that are needed in order to be able to maintain that. The box itself, what we can tell you is we've stressed it really to one of the worst case profiles that are out there, which is considered the WHO, the legacy WHO profile. And once we knew that the box could withstand that profile, we knew that we were onto something. And working with the supply partners that we have with transportation, and we limited it, by the way, to those three partners, primarily because we knew time was going to be of the essence. We knew that we couldn't have our products sit really on tarmacs in different places for hours and days and get lost. And utilizing the capabilities of these partners, it was one of the most critical components to the success factor that we have today. And this, again, this slide just really, or these slides just showcases all of the work, all the fantastic work that went into developing this end-to-end capability, working with our partners, the freezer farms that we have at our manufacturing sites, working with the manufacturing sites in terms of how to do the packing, because it was such a critical component. And of course, our fearless leader here, Tanya Alcorn, who came down and witnessed firsthand, of course, with Mike McDermott, who's our senior fearless leader, and just coming out and looking at all of the great advancements that have been done. Again, making sure that every single vial tray, as it's packed the way that we want it. If there's a seam that's not where it needs to be, that that seam isn't there. I mean, I can tell you that similar to what Caitlin says, like we really felt like we were out there, saving the world. That's the way it was positioned with us. And long hours, 14, 16 hours a day, but it was well worth it, and it continues to be worth it because we're continuing to advance these capabilities as much as we can, again, to make it that much better of a processing capability for our patients. And With that, I will pass it back over to Mona.
Thank you. Thank you, James. That was certainly energizing. I've listened to this presentation several times, and it always gets me so excited. The innovation and the teamwork and the leadership. It's just such a proud moment to be at Pfizer. So if we can go to the next slide. Before I go into the DEI strategy at Pfizer, I wanted to share a little bit about myself and my career journey at Pfizer. As Arthur mentioned, I've been with the company now for 13 years. I graduated in 2006 with a Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration and HR Management. I worked full-time and I went to school full-time. Upon graduating, I stayed with the Division of Taxation here in New Jersey for about another year before I moved into Wyeth, which Pfizer acquired. And I took on the role as an administrative assistant. And I think back to that moment after I graduated and I was working full-time as an IT specialist. And I remember the hiring manager, who is still a mentor to me today, told me, "You have your degree, you have your work experience, why would you take this role?" And I was at the end of my search and I really wanted to get into pharma or IT or do something with my business degree. And I'm really thankful for that moment, because I remember him, he gave me that opportunity. And I remember telling him to give me the opportunity to do admin work and take on projects. And so I did. And I automated the first solution for tracking our counterfeit drug cases for Wyeth. And so what you'll notice, a theme through my career here at Pfizer, is just growth and opportunity. And just a few years later, I was promoted to a project analyst, leading a project management initiative for a $60 million serialization program, just 2 years in. And this was the first program I ever got to manage. It was the most complicated, it was global. There were so many dependencies between engineers, supply chain, legal, marketing, the site leaders, and quality. And it gave me my first truly global and cross-functional experience at Pfizer. My next position was in the global supply chain organization, supporting our colleague development capability across 65 different markets. The program was called Market Transformation, and I was tasked with designing and launching a virtual platform for our colleagues to access our streamlined processes across our entire supply chain network. I was then promoted to the Global Operations Excellence Lead, and the next 5 years were a journey of developing market capabilities from maturity level 0 and 1 to best in class. And I got to experience being a part of changing culture, strategy, process, and most importantly, developing a very close network of colleagues around the world that I can call my friends. And then the growing stops and you begin getting in the hang of things. And that's a time where you want to grow and find new opportunity. And for me, it was beginning to push myself out of my comfort zone. And I began pursuing my next challenge. An area I wasn't comfortable with was finance. And I knew I had the skill, I just wasn't really comfortable with it. And so naturally, that's what I needed to do next. And my next position was in the business technology organization. I began by learning how to manage an IT portfolio, and a few months in, I understood the financial processes and delivered simplification across the team. I later then took on simplification and automation of our capital portfolio process across our entire technology organization. In parallel, where I began to get really involved with diversity, equity, and inclusion work, was bringing a program to our New Jersey site, a program called Business Technology for Girls, where I brought in inner city schoolgirls from middle school and high school into Pfizer for the day to teach them about careers in STEM and challenge them on their biases that they have encountered about entering STEM. This became my passion and the part of the work that I enjoyed the most, is making that impact. Naturally, when the D&I lead position was listed at Pfizer, I spoke to my manager, I spoke to my sponsor, she connected me to my hiring manager for a conversation, and I designed a plan, just selling every skill I had in that interview until I landed the position. I asked, this is what I wanted to do, when can I get started? And a few weeks later, I was offered the position. It took me 10 years to get to this point, to figure out what I wanted to do. And I truly believe this 11-year journey to that point was getting you ready for a role where I don't feel it's my job, it's my purpose. So Pfizer supported my growth, development as a leader, and it's been a really exciting 13 years here, where every day I'm learning something new and meeting someone new around the world. So with that, I'll go to the next slide, where we'll highlight some of our main goals specifically around people. And I've mentioned this before at the beginning of our deck, is our purpose at Pfizer is very clear. It's achieving breakthroughs that change patients' lives. And we know that our people are our competitive advantage. And that means not only attracting the best and brightest talent, but it's also ensuring our colleagues can thrive in an environment where we champion DEI around the world every day. In our purpose blueprint, our bold move is to unleash the power of our people and make Pfizer an amazing workplace for all. Our values of courage, excellence, joy, and equity all support our bold moves. The value of equity for us is defined as every person deserves to be seen, heard, and cared for. And we do that by being inclusive, acting with integrity, and reducing healthcare disparities. Next slide, please. We're very proud of our DEI efforts as we strive to make Pfizer ultimately as diverse as the patients and communities we serve. Our DEI strategy has 4 pillars. The patients pillar focuses our efforts on closing healthcare disparities in diverse communities across the world. We want all patients to have equal access to healthcare and accessible and affordable drugs. The colleagues pillar is the pillar my role is aligned to. Our diversity and inclusion leads, and we have 4 around the world, partner with business leaders to build strategies that make us a sought-after destination for diverse talent globally. We do that by ensuring that D&I is not something separate, it's embraced in all aspects of our business. And we are being successful in increasing representation, inclusion, and engagement of talent. In the communities pillar, we're focused on supporting policies that promote fairness, equality, and respect for people. And finally, in our partners pillar, we are committed to working with suppliers and vendors who share our values, partnerships like NSBE, the Human Rights Campaign, Catalyst, Disability In, Thurgood Marshall College Fund, and HBCU Connect, just to name a few. We also maintain a robust supplier diversity program so that underrepresented or disadvantaged businesses have an equal opportunity to compete for our business. We provide scholarships and mentorship for diverse business leaders to attend leadership and mentorship programs. Next slide, please. 2020 marked an important inflection point when it comes to the role of corporations in society. I'm sure you've all seen how companies have stepped up, and I'm very proud in particular in the way that Pfizer stepped up to lead. We set concrete goals to address systematic racism, gender equity challenges by reviewing and augmenting our plans to increase diversity and opportunity parity by 2025, particularly focusing on increasing female and U.S. minority representation at leadership levels. We have a new environmental, social, and governance report. I urge you all to check that out. And this really represents a new chapter for us, a new chapter of transparency that we haven't shown before. And really what we're trying to do ultimately is have our stakeholders be aware of our priority ESG issues and disclose how our performance on those non-financial metrics are contributing to that long-term value creation. In the report, you're going to see employee engagement scores, our culture, our values, our partnerships that we've made, including a recent commitment with the National Association of Manufacturers to increase opportunity for people of color in the US. You'll learn more about our gender pay equity, and for the second year in a row, I'm really proud to present that Pfizer announced both internally and externally the findings of that pay equity study. And we show that female colleagues globally are being paid at 99.3% of what we pay male colleagues. And when we look at minority versus non-minority pay in the US, we're almost at dollar for dollar parity, 99.8% with the pay of non-minorities. Our commitment to pay equity for all colleagues is really based on our value of equity and our intention to continue to build a diverse and inclusive workforce. So again, I encourage you to read more about our commitments to DEI in our new ESG report. We've also, for the first time ever, published our human capital metrics by level, by gender, and by race. You'll find this in our annual report at our website. Next slide. And finally, our more than 100 global colleague resource groups around the world. They offer support, developmental opportunities, mentoring, and networking opportunities to help their members enhance their skills and advance their careers. And you'll see these are the main CRGs with the following affinities from the Global Asian Alliance, Global Black Communities, Individuals with Disabilities, and those are just some of the CRGs that we have around the world. This year the last year was a little bit different than any other year we faced, and it's the global pandemic and social justice movements. Our CRGs were a critical component in helping colleagues through navigating through some of those issues. And our CRGs hosted virtual events with external experts and internal leaders to discuss equity, systematic racism, allyship, clinical trial diversity, and the impact of COVID-19 on Black and Latino communities. We also held a global conversation on race for our annual Diversity and Inclusion Summit with Dr. Ibram Kenzie, and we continued those discussions around the world, featuring conversations on race from Asia, Latin America, Europe, and more. Shortly after this next video, Sean Hudson, VP of Learning and Development at Pfizer, is going to spend a few minutes describing the Global Black Community CRG as a key member. Next slide. Thank you.
2020 was quite a year. More than any time in recent memory, we were asked to find new ways to survive and thrive, to ensure the health and happiness of our families. We left our cities for comfort and safety of home. We managed the stresses that came with our new lifestyle, as neighbors and community members did their best to cope. During this time, we became caregivers and patients, parent teachers, and activists. And after all of this, somehow, as if this wasn't enough, we found our health would become politicized. Then, we were really tested. Old wounds were opened during a time when the world was a captive audience to witness the unthinkable. And in the aftermath, so many of us found our voices. We started to speak up for what was right. Across the GBC, we knew that action was needed to support those who wanted to be heard and to address the emotional impact of these events on our community. We had to come together to be a positive force towards driving change that would not only help heal these old wounds, but help Pfizer take the right stance and make commitments that will result in real change. In a year that has tested us in so many ways, it's important to remember how the strength and creativity of the GBC came through under the most difficult of circumstances. It's our resolve that brings in 2021 with promise. We will find new ways to advance the conversations on race and the importance of diversity, inclusion, and equity here at Pfizer. We need an impactful agenda, one that not only recognizes but celebrates the contributions and value of everyone in our community. Let's come together to change the lives of those around us, the caregivers, patients, parent teachers, and activists who need us. We are the GBC. We are the Pfizer community. We change lives.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sean Hudson, and every time I get the chance to see that video, I always get re-inspired. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and I'm excited that we have the opportunity to engage with all of you. As has been said, I'm Sean Hudson. I'm a vice president in Pfizer's digital organization. I have the pleasure of leading a group of colleagues who are using predictive and advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, and digital tools to really reimagine how we drive the learning and development of all of our colleagues across the globe at Pfizer. And so I'm excited to share with you, as my other colleagues have as well, a bit about my own career journey, but also to tell you a bit more about the global Black community. Next slide, please. And so this is me on a page. And so I've had the opportunity to be at Pfizer for more than 17 years. And across that time, I have had the opportunity as well to sort of be led by my intellectual curiosity, and just great opportunities. And so I joined Pfizer in 2003 to lead our US HIV business. I've worked across multiple business and multiple functions, including strategy roles, global commercial operations roles. And as I've said, I currently work in our digital organization. One of the things that's most important to me about my journey at Pfizer is having the opportunity not only to sort of apply my technical skills, but also my passion to opportunities. And so one of the great fortunes that I've had across my time at Pfizer is to blend my strategy skill set with my passion for health equity. And so for a while, I led an initiative called 3 Virtues that was particularly focused on how can Pfizer be more intentional in its engagement with African Americans. 1, to focus on how we address and create more health equity. 2, how we create a talent pipeline of people of color, specifically of African descent. And also, how do we more thoughtfully engage with social civic organizations in a partnership to have meaningful and positive impact on the African American community. And so in addition to that, I've held a lot of different roles and responsibilities across my time. And so one of the things that I really want you all to take away from the few moments that I have to share with you is the journey. And hopefully by sharing my own journey, you'll find some connections and some commonalities that can help inform how you journey as well. And so I grew up in Athens, Georgia. I'm a proud alumnus of Morehouse College and also the Ross Graduate School of Business at the University of Michigan. And one of the things that my education has afforded me is just the opportunity to become a global citizen. So having had the opportunity to travel and create business impact, but also personal connections across the globe. And as I think about my journey, I started off as a banker, working in import-export banking. I had a keen interest in healthcare, so that led me actually to business school, where I sort of had a dual concentration in strategy, corporate strategy, but also took classes in the School of Public Health. And it's really across those journeys and working in companies like Bristol Myers Squibb, Johnson & Johnson, and now Pfizer, where I've actually had the opportunity to sort of really, again, have the opportunity to apply what I know to what I care about. And what I care about, first and foremost, is my family and ways that I can be intentional in supporting them, my 2 sons and my wife. But I also think it's important to take advantage of those opportunities to continue to grow oneself. And so I'm quite active in mentoring. I sit on the board of the National Mentoring Partnership that creates policy and opportunity to really make sure that there's a real durable pathway for how young people with the benefit of great mentoring can get to all the opportunities that they're seeking and solving for. Next slide, please. And one of the ways I choose to use my time is being a member of the global Black community at Pfizer. And why that's important to me and hopefully important to you is creating community and creating the opportunity for engagement with others can be an amplifier of one's career journey and one's sort of way to navigate Pfizer in particular. The global Black community is a multi-function, multi-dispersed organization. We have sites across the country. We have membership from every function and area of importance at Pfizer. And what we're really focused on is making sure that we attract talent on board and successfully allow that talent to grow their own skill set and do so in an environment of colleagues who care about them in ways that are cultural, but also ways that are career oriented as well. And so I'm happy to tell you all the things that there is to know about the global Black community, but really what's important to share is it's an opportunity to be a part of something that's also inside of Pfizer. And so as you saw from the video, it's a chance to sort of bring your whole person to work. It's a chance to sort of explore and engage with others so that you can continue to build yourself. And it's also the opportunity to really figure out, well, how do you make sure that you are letting Pfizer go through you and you're going through Pfizer at the same time? And so the global Black community is that opportunity. It's the opportunity to really just get to the moment where you can share more about who you are and what you care about to the benefit of others. And so with that, I'm happy when we get to the panel discussion to talk more about how the community helps to provide that resource, helps to provide the tools and the capability set to be successful in navigating Pfizer. But at this moment, it's my opportunity to share and to hand over to our Chief Patient Officer, Dr. Dara Richardson Heron. And so she is outstanding, and you'll hear from her in just a second. And as I turn it over to her, I just have to say what a pleasure it is to engage with someone of her caliber and of her capability set as she leads Pfizer and she engages all of us to help address and create more health equity. So Dr. Dara, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Sean. I really, really appreciate your kind words. They mean all the more coming from you, given how committed I know you are and have been for years to equity at Pfizer and beyond. So thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, truly a pleasure. I often describe myself as a physician by trade and an advocate by choice. And I just want to share a little bit about how that came about. At age 17, I came to New York from my place of birth, which is Oklahoma City. And I came to New York City, arguably quite a difference between Oklahoma City and New York City. But I came to New York City very intentionally to study biology at Barnard College and medicine at New York University. And honestly, it was doing my residency at Bellevue Hospital, which many of you may know as the oldest public hospital in the United States. It was in many ways an inflection point, both professionally and personally, because it was at Bellevue where I actually saw patients, many who through no fault of their own, they presented with late stage diseases. And for years, I'd studied, I'd learned about health disparities in academic settings, but it was different. I was on the front lines seeing health disparities play out in a real way. And it was often because people had little or no access to healthcare. And for me, that was devastating. But as I look back, it was also an aha moment for me. And I realized that the impact that I wanted to create in the world was going to require me to think big, far beyond what was known as the traditional clinical settings that were the norm for physicians at the time. I didn't box myself in. I knew that I needed to make a bold move and chart a non-traditional path, career path, so that I could contribute not only to the medical profession, but to society as a whole. And that decision set me on a 25 plus year career path that has spanned corporate, academic, for-profit, nonprofit. But with each step along the way, I've been very intentional about figuring out ways to decrease the burden of the disease, to connect with and be an advocate both with and for patients, particularly those who've been underserved by our nation's healthcare system. And, in my role now as Pfizer's Chief Patient Officer, I have the opportunity, and quite frankly, it's a huge responsibility to make patients, all patients, our North Star and our partners and our focus in everything that we do. And, at Pfizer, we know the responsibility that rests on our shoulders. And we're so very proud of our efforts to develop a COVID-19 vaccine with our partner. And as many of you know and have heard from my colleagues, the vaccine hasn't been approved or licensed by the FDA, but we're using it now under emergency use for individuals age 16 and older. But, the topic is health equity. And let's face it, in order to achieve health equity and ensure that medicines, treatments, or vaccines we develop benefit all patients, and also in order to achieve our mission to bring forth breakthroughs that change patients' lives, we have to focus on the needs, and we have to have direct input and participation from patients from all walks of life. In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane. And this much is clear. The COVID-19 virus is not impacting all people equally. You hear every day vulnerable and underserved communities, including racial and ethnic minorities, face increased risks of contracting and suffering serious consequences as a result of COVID-19. You know, the CDC just released numbers showing that after adjusting for age, Hispanic and Black Americans are shown to die at a rate of around twice that of white Americans. And they're around 3 times more likely than white Americans to require hospitalization. A study out of my alma mater, NYU Langone Health, indicated that Black and Hispanic patients are not experiencing stark racial disparities related to COVID-19 because they are inherently more susceptible to the disease, but rather these disparities are present because Black and Hispanic patients are more likely to be exposed to the virus and are also more likely to be negatively impacted by systemic and institutional barriers that make it difficult for them to get the care they need. Now, data is also showing that some individuals, including underserved populations and communities of color, have high levels of mistrust of a COVID-19 vaccine. And before I go into more detail on that, I'd be remiss to not point out that hesitancy is not the entire story, because in many cases, hesitancy has turned into confidence, but unfortunately, confidence is now turning into frustration that I'll speak about a little bit later. But let's face it. I mean, I think we all have in our family members hesitancy still exists, and recent polling also suggests that some rural and Republican voters are skeptical to get the vaccine. And a report also found that 4 in 10 frontline healthcare workers in the United States have not been vaccinated against COVID-19, despite this group being one of the first to be offered the vaccine. And that was a poll that was conducted between February 11th and March 7th. And it said that some of America's frontline healthcare workers have no plan to get the shot whatsoever. And now, this is troubling for me as a physician for many reasons, but for now, let's just focus on communities of color generally. There was a Kaiser Family Foundation, a vaccine monitor, and they are tracking the public's attitudes and experiences with COVID-19 vaccinations. And they released a report at the end of February. And you know, the new data they reported thankfully reveals an increase in vaccine interest and enthusiasm among racial and ethnic groups. So that's great news. But Black and Hispanic adults, unfortunately, continue to be much more likely than white adults to report that they will, quote unquote, wait and see before getting vaccinated. And overall, 1 in 5 adults aged 18 to 65 say that they will wait and see how the vaccine is working for other people before getting vaccinated themselves. But for Black adults in this age range, 34% say that they will wait and see, and 26% of Hispanic adults say that they'll wait and see. And when you remove data from Black and Hispanic adults who are over the age of 65, who seem much more willing to get the vaccine, you see that Black and Hispanic adults between the ages of 18 and 64 are nearly twice as likely as their white counterparts to say that they will wait and see before getting vaccinated. Now, this is a real problem because those who are perhaps at the greatest risk of COVID-19 are among the least likely to get a vaccine. And it's important, you know, to take a moment to contextualize some of the hesitancy we're seeing. Because let's face it, many underserved communities, particularly communities of color, have a mistrust in our nation's healthcare system, and with good reason, because communities of color have not previously, and in many cases still are not, always treated with the respect and dignity we deserve. And, you know, think about historical transgressions like the Tuskegee syphilis study and the unauthorized use of Henrietta Lacks cancer cells, but also continued barriers that exist today, including systemic racism, lack of access to healthcare, implicit bias, and micro and even macroaggressions. So taken together, all of these things can clearly impact the willingness of some people of color to receive a COVID-19 vaccine. And although there have been many policies and guidelines put in place to protect patients and research subjects, you may have heard of something called a common rule, institutional review boards. You know, this mistrust in some cases is hard to undo. But I think we can all agree that this lingering mistrust, even though it's not the full story, it's something that we have to address and try to resolve if we want to save lives now and positively impact health disparities more broadly. The ultimate goal, of course, is to enhance vaccine equity and accessibility. And so one of the first barriers that we have to address is to make sure we have the right messengers. There's been legions of research that's shown that multicultural leaders, figures of authority, community leaders can have a positive influencing factor for many, whether that's faith-based, religious leaders, attorneys, athletes, even engineers. Now is the time for us to broaden the choir, to include as many trusted, diverse voices as we can so that we can reach everyone. We know the impact individuals can have on our friends, on our families, and also on the overall health and future course of COVID-19 vaccine rates in communities of color. So we're counting on everyone to help us contain the pandemic and prevent the impact and prevent the loss that we saw with Caitlin and John. We don't want anyone to go through that. The second barrier we have to address is to ensure that not only do we dispel myths that are out there, we have to break down the science and have the right information and message to share, a message that is understandable, culturally sensitive, and one that resonates with the communities we're trying to reach, and preferably one that is co-created with the messages, with the communities we are actually trying to reach. There are a lot of memes out there and a lot of other misinformation on social media that say otherwise, but we have to find the right language to make it clear that there is no microchip in the vaccine. We also have to choose the right words to make it clear that you cannot get COVID-19 from taking the vaccine, because none of the COVID-19 vaccines currently authorized or being developed in the United States contain any live virus that actually causes COVID-19. There's another myth out there that is, and misinformation that the vaccine causes infertility. The CDC posted information about this topic on their website. There is absolutely no scientific evidence to suggest that the COVID vaccine could cause infertility. In addition, infertility is not known to occur as a result of the natural COVID-19 disease. So that also further demonstrates that the immune response to the virus, whether induced by infection or a vaccine, it's not likely to cause infertility. But there have been many reports on social media falsely asserting that the vaccine could cause infertility. And the FDA is concerned that this misinformation may cause, particularly some women, to avoid vaccination to prevent COVID-19, which, as we know, is a life-threatening disease. While, you can't answer every question because we're so still learning so much about the vaccine, it's always important to talk to your healthcare provider if you have questions, but make sure that you are talking to reputable sources. Given the world we live in, many people seek out Dr. Google, and I personally have a problem with Dr. Google, but don't go to Dr. Google or social media for your health information. It's really important. I cannot stress enough the importance of utilizing trusted and reputable sources of vital health information, places like the CDC, the National Institutes of Health, and other reputable sources. And I get it, COVID-19 is technical, but we have to do a better job of making health information much more accessible, and we have to get our information from the right sources. Now, the third barrier we have to address in order to achieve health equity is to make sure that we are meeting individuals wherever they are on their trust journey and on their vaccine confidence journey. I've devoted much of my life and career to health disparities, and what I know for sure is that now more than ever, we must work overtime to make the value proposition clear as to why it's absolutely necessary for people from all walks of life to get in the game. COVID-19 is real. If over 550,000 deaths doesn't make you realize that it's real, I'm not sure what else I can do. But we have to be mindful that at the end of the day, taking a vaccine or any medication or treatment for that matter is a personal decision. So our job is not to judge, it's not to embarrass or shame people, but instead we have to do whatever it takes to make sure that our communities are fully informed with accurate, culturally sensitive, and actionable information, the information they need about the benefits and risks to help them make the best decisions for themselves, their families, and ultimately our world. And our federal and state governments have to do what it takes to make sure that there's equitable access and the distribution, the equitable distribution that Jean mentioned. And we have to acknowledge that there's no one size fits all approach. A one size fits all approach isn't going to work here. We need precision engagement with members of our communities. Racial and ethnic and other underserved communities are not monolithic. So it's incumbent upon us to tailor and adapt our approach so that we can, in partnership with community and grassroots organizations, clearly understand where people are. We need to clearly understand people's needs and work together to address them in a way that respectfully and authentically enhances vaccine confidence and healthcare knowledge and understanding. And this work cannot be done alone. We see genuine and authentic partner engagement and trust building as a common denominator across all of our efforts. We have what is known as a Multicultural Health Equity Collective that's co-led by Melissa Bishop Murphy and Naisha Foster. Melissa's with us today. We have a long and robust history of working with these groups and addressing access to care and access to Pfizer's medicines. And we've been able to engage and leverage our partners quickly because people like Melissa and Sean and Jean and others have spent years building and cultivating these relationships because we're aware that trusting relationships have to be nurtured and fueled over time by consistent and mutually beneficial interactions. And in addition to our already existing multicultural health equity work, with grassroots organizations, we've also supported the co-creation of a U.S. advocacy coalition called the COVID-19 Vaccine Education and Equity Project. And you can find that at covidvaccineproject.org. We've developed PSAs, collateral in multiple languages, billboards, and all other kinds of material to raise awareness and build understanding and confidence in our vaccines and really do our part to reduce the disparities that we're seeing. And these efforts, combined with our ongoing work to reach multicultural communities through the Multicultural Health Equity Collective, really aim to raise awareness and reduce disparities. And as I briefly mentioned earlier, I want to point out that while some hesitancy still exists, I don't want us to internalize this narrative to a point that it ignores the realities we are facing as it relates to federal and state distribution and access to the vaccine. The fact is that many Black and Brown communities are moving from hesitancy to acceptance when it comes to getting a vaccine, but we're unfortunately hearing over and over that many communities of color are feeling frustrated, given real and significant disparities and inequities in being able to access the vaccine, whether it's challenges with online vaccine enrollment due to the digital divide, or the sites not being user-friendly, or long lines, and not having a car in the closest site is many miles away. You might have seen that just recently on 60 Minutes yesterday. According to an analysis by the Kaiser Family Foundation on March 17th, there's a consistent pattern across states of Black and Hispanic people receiving smaller shares of vaccinations compared to their shares of cases and deaths compared in the total population. For example, let me just give you an example. In California, 21% of the vaccinations have gone to the Hispanic and Latinx individuals, while they account for 55% of the cases, 46% of the deaths, and 40% of the total population of the state. All right, let's talk about the District of Columbia. Black people have received only 31% of the vaccinations, while they make up 49% of the cases and 76% of the deaths and 46% of the total population. State by state, I could go through this. And this data clearly shows that, white people received a higher share of vaccinations compared to their share of cases of death and their share of the total population in most states that are reporting data. That's a problem. That's not equitable. So in addition to making sure that we have the right messenger, the right message, the respectful precision engagement that we need to advance vaccine confidence, we also have to do a much better job at collecting data to understand who's actually getting the vaccine. And again, I don't want to internalize that narrative that Black and Brown people are just hesitant. there are many people that want to get the vaccine, but just don't have access to it. And as of March 1st, the CDC data showed that race and ethnicity was known for just over 54% of people who had received at least one dose of the vaccine. And the absence of this comprehensive data makes it impossible to know whether a vaccine distribution is truly equitable. And most importantly, we need this information to help us understand how to correct any disparities. So this is both a fairness and an empathy issue, but it's also a disease control issue. If underserved communities are among those most likely to suffer complications and die, then those are the groups that governments need to make sure we are reaching with the vaccine. So as I close, I just want to say, for me, as heartbreaking and challenging as this pandemic has been, I also see it as a real inflection point and an opportunity to do a stop and full reset to establish a new normal on how we and others in our communities engage much more effectively with and demand that our nation's healthcare system take steps to better meet our needs and the needs of our friends and families. Because no doubt this pandemic has made one thing abundantly clear: we're all in this together. And the responsibility of our nation's health and health equity is both individual and collective. And we're still seeing hundreds of Americans die every day as a result of this virus. So we know that every minute of every day matters. And we, as leaders of good conscience, cannot sit idly by. And I will say that many young people are refusing to get the vaccine. I hope that's, not any of you on the call, because none of us can sit idly by and risk having the negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on racial and ethnic minorities and other underserved communities become even greater, leading to further exacerbation of already existing and unacceptable health disparities. So while we are all counting on science and vaccines to provide a bright light at the end of a very dark tunnel, the reality is vaccines alone don't prevent disease. Vaccinations do. So I hope that we can all pledge to leverage our collective power to move at the speed of both science and trust to ensure that the citizens of our nation are armed with the accurate information they need to make an informed decision about vaccination, so that hopefully together we can come out of this pandemic stronger and more resilient than ever. Thank you.
Wow, I am clapping and cheering. I couldn't get off mic fast enough. Thank you so much. I mean, I really am moved by your level of conviction mixed with your optimism and hope, which are sometimes mixed together, but really are two very different things. I heard a couple of things that resonated. One is, right, it's gonna take multiple approaches. It's not one size fits all. And that requires us to be precise. And it's through engagements like this, it's through having conversations that I was really met with more calm to hear that there's some data showing that perception in the Black community is starting to change, because it's a tough conversation, but a long time coming. So more work to be done. So thank you. And we look forward to continuing the partnership.
You are most welcome. It's my pleasure.
So folks should be seeing the instructions for joining the polling game, which should be coming up now. So I'll give everyone a moment to access the game, and please reference your notes and all the great words of wisdom and factoids that you've heard from the previous presenters. I'll give folks about 5 or 6 seconds before we progress through. You can access it via the QR code or via the web link shown. And we should also be placing that in the chat to make it easy for you to click. All right, now remember, there are points for both the correct answer and the speed of response. You'll have about 20 to 30 seconds to answer each question. And there are 5 questions, so, pace yourself accordingly. All right, this is the first question. What was it about, why was it a personal goal of the Iceman to develop over-engineered solutions for the COVID-19 vaccine delivery process? And the options are A, failure was never an option with the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine, and the Iceman is good at taking direction. B, to enable equitable vaccine delivery to all markets. C, the Iceman was born in a low-income country, so he wanted to ensure vaccine availability for those markets. Or D, all of the above. I'll give you guys a little more time. I see responses coming in. We're at 83 responses. Let's see if we can get this up. 20 seconds left. Some people are changing their answers. All right, I'm going to close the poll now. All right. We see that there were some who were really astute in taking notes and got the correct answer is B, to enable equitable vaccine delivery to all markets. Very, very important. Now let's see who is at the top of the board. All right, a couple of people tied for first with 1,000 points. Let's see how this journey continues with question number 2. Approximately how many days apart are the first and second doses of the COVID-19 vaccine administered? A, 7 days, B, 14 days, C, 21 days, or D, 28 days. About 15 seconds left on the clock. 10 seconds. 5 seconds, and time. Hopefully, many of you know this perhaps from personal experience. Yeah, no surprises here. C, 21 days. Oh, someone has moved up. There's a clear leader. Let's see if they keep the lead. Pfizer's diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy has 4 pillars. What are they? A, employees, pharmacies, leaders, and belonging. B, people, government, community, and patients. C, patients, colleagues, communities, and partners. Or D, none of these. About 10 seconds left. Give you a few more moments. 2 seconds, 1 second, and time. Absolutely, great job, C. It's indeed patients, colleagues, communities, and partners. Oh, there's some movement. Looks like Timmy here is leading the pack, but only a few 100-point margin. So which of the following is not true about Pfizer's colleague resource groups? A, they enable networking opportunities. B, provide career navigation resources. C, supports mentoring and coaching. D, is solely focused on skill building. Which of the following is not true? 10 seconds. 5 seconds. And next. Right. Was much agreement here. Okay, Timmy, staying in the lead. And where did our fearless leader and chief patient officer complete her medical residency? A, Columbia University Medical Center. B, Brigham and Women's Hospital. C, the Mayo Clinic of Medicine and Science. Or D, Bellevue Hospital. Time is almost up. 3 seconds. Yes, very astute listeners. Awesome. I'm sure she's very proud. All right, let's see how we wrapped up here. Wow, there were some last minute shifts. So we have 3 winners tied for first. And so we will take these names and make sure to be in touch regarding the opportunity to engage with senior leaders at Pfizer for some mentoring and engagement. Just want to make sure we have the names captured well. Great. All right. Now we want to move forward to Q&A. We have a bit of time to still take questions. I know questions have been coming in on the chat and want to have the opportunity for our senior leaders at Pfizer to come on camera and off mic and briefly introduce themselves, and then we can start to address many of the questions here. So perhaps we can start from right to left with Melissa.
Hi, thank you, Arthur. My name is Melissa Bishop Murphy. I've been with Pfizer almost 23 years in the government relations space and co-lead Pfizer's Multicultural Health Equity Collective, and very excited to be back for a second year at the NSBE conference and look forward to having the discussion and answering questions.
Awesome, welcome. And then next, Meg.
Hi, my name is Meg Roosh. I'm a leader in pharmaceutical sciences in research and development. So our role is to develop manufacturing and quality control processes for all of Pfizer's vaccines and complex biologic products. So we were involved in great depth with the COVID-19 vaccine development. And it's great to be here.
Welcome. And returning again, Roberto.
Hi, everybody. Roberto Silveira. I'm the Vice President of Global Technology and Engineering. Then my role is to bring technology into the manufacturing sites to enable process improvements and any sort of deviations you have in the process to do the investigation around that. And I also head of the engineering group, which actually had to make a lot of investments for the COVID vaccine. Happy to be back on the NSBE, and it was interesting. It came the first time, I think we didn't have a vaccine yet. And it was before we had the EUA approval. And I was so happy that we do have one, and all these efforts has been very helpful for the whole world in a way.
Awesome. No, pleasure to have you again. So let's start with questions in the chat. So please continue to use the Q&A feature, to be more specific, not the chat. Use the Q&A feature. You can continue to post questions there. We'll try to answer as many as possible live or answer them via text. And you can also upvote upvote questions to have them prioritized. I'm just going to start with the first one here. And perhaps, Melissa, you can help us with this one. You know, a lot of people are, you know, now taking, you know, the 3 vaccines, or they're not taking the 3 vaccines now, thinking that there will be a new strain of the virus that the vaccines may not work against. You know, what are your thoughts on this, the concept of, right, the variants, and what kind of maybe be in this cycle of, you know, new vaccine, new vaccine?
Thank you, Arthur. Well, my personal stance on this is that we've heard such compelling stories, personal stories from those who are being impacted now by the COVID-19 virus. And so to me, if there's a solution or a cure or help, that we should take advantage of that help now. There are different variants. We have the Brazil variant, South African variant, and the UK variant. And we have seen with Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine that our COVID-19 vaccine is effective against those variants. So I would say that don't wait for more variants to come. You're hearing from CDC and others who are saying, get your vaccine now when you have that opportunity. Get all the information so when you have that opportunity that you can make a decision as to whether or not you should take the vaccine.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
We have a question from Jacoby. Hopefully I am doing respect on some of the names. Apologies if there's an error there. Being that recent clinical data show that the Pfizer, this is building, I think, upon the same concept, is effective against variants, is Pfizer still researching or taking any efforts looking at other variants or the concept of a booster in the future, so much as you're, of course, able to share?
Meg, I'll start the answer, and then if you want to finish, or Dr. Dara. But yes, we have seen, as I mentioned, that our vaccine is effective against the current variants that we know of. We are looking at also the possibility of a booster. Does any of my colleagues want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So as Melissa said, you know, we are taking steps to be ready in case a strain becomes resistant to the current protection that's afforded by the vaccine. So that's why our teams have begun the evaluation of both safety and the ability to generate an immune response of a 3rd dose of our vaccine, to really understand what a 3rd dose or a booster shot would do in terms of the immune system, particularly as it relates to newly emerging variants of COVID. And also, our teams are separately in ongoing discussions with regulatory authorities regarding a potential clinical study to evaluate variant-specific vaccines that would have a different mRNA sequence. I know I can get technical with this audience, but this could position us to update the current vaccine quickly if the need arises to protect against yet another circulating strain. But I want to just double down on something that Melissa said. The best way to prevent future variants is to get vaccinated now, because if the virus doesn't have the ability to bounce around and change in different ways, then you're not going to have all of these variants. So the best way to protect yourselves, your family, our world, our nation against more variants is for more people to get vaccinated when it's their turn.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to try and do a little bit of editorializing here, combining questions. We also got some questions leading up to the event from registrants. This one is really related to kind of access. We know that a number of vaccine centers have been placed in communities of color, but may be going to individuals that aren't the target audience. Mario here mentions, a number of potentially white individuals taking the vaccines that may be targeted for communities of color. Is this happening? And maybe, expanding upon that, what should we do?
So yes, it is happening. I would say not to at the extent that was happening. As you know, the way that the process works, the state governments determine where the vaccination sites are, particularly the Department of Public Health for each state. When this issue came up, I know for a fact a number of states changed their processes so that they worked with, let's say, African American churches in particular, so that the vaccine went to the churches and the churches helped sign up their constituents or the people in their particular communities. So what I would say is if you're aware of this occurring in your communities, reach out to the Department of Public Health and they will be very responsive to this issue. I know that now also, you may have remembered that the computer was a big issue in multicultural communities. Now, all of the public health departments have a phone number that you can call to also schedule your appointments as opposed to just having to go online. And then there's a number of sites beyond the traditional sites. So it's now the Walgreens, the Publix, some of the more Walmart, they're all now providing the vaccines, which is opening up access to people as well. But if you're having trouble, definitely reach out to the Department of Public Health. You can also reach out to me. I know that the National Black Caucus of State Legislators, the National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators is all over this issue, and they're working in concert with the public health departments.
No, thank you. I may be moving to a lens on the supply chain. There's a lot of misinformation. This question's from Yvonne. About vaccine distribution and particularly in other countries. How is Pfizer engaging with the international community that may have a challenge with access to the internet, to get the vaccine information and education that's important for them to make the right decision for themselves?
So I'll take I work in the US, so I don't have a lot of information about what's going on outside of the US. We sell the COVID-19 vaccine to the government. So not only in the US, but externally as well. So that information is typically coming out by the government to their citizens. So if there's an issue, it seems to me like we're doing in the US where we're engaging those trusted sources, that those trusted sources should be working in concert with the government. I think I also saw somewhere in the chat that this was brought up as a solution, that those trusted sources in those communities need to be working and partnering with government to make sure that those who most need that COVID-19 vaccine, whether it be in the US or outside of the US, have that. So happy to talk offline with the person who had that question and see how we can address that. Certainly Pfizer is all over the world, so could definitely reach out to the correct people that we need to reach out to.
And then maybe a question for James and Meg, or whoever may want to chime in. When we're looking at the end of the supply chain and making sure it's running smoothly, what does that look like in other countries and maybe some of the challenges you've been able to overcome, building upon the points shared earlier?
Yeah, so I guess I'll take a stab at the first piece in terms of the actual physical distribution. For the most part, like I said, there are various different supply chain scenarios, most of which we go direct to a point of use location. So our partners actually move the product to point of vaccination centers directly for, we'll say, a bulk of the shipments that go out. But in areas or markets where we're either distributing to a central location, such as a government facility or something similar, the true last mile, if you will, in those particular areas, we aren't always involved in, but we do provide support where necessary. But for the most part, we actually have a global last mile enabling team with their focus primarily to ensure that we get the product once it arrives in those markets to the location where it actually needs to be used. So for the most part, the issues that we see, some of them are, we'll say, minor, but they require a lot of resources. It might be importation, or some delays as a result of whether it's documentation. And sometimes it's really ensuring that you have an entity in that market to really be able to do that physical move. But for the most part, we've been able to overcome most of those challenges. What's been fantastic also with the COVID-19 vaccine is local governments are empowered, of course, to work with us to get product down to those locations. So if there is a barrier, once we have the discussions with the right individuals in those markets, those barriers tend to they tend to get removed. So we've been really successful with just partnering with the right in-market personnel to allow us, again, to physically be able to move the products to where they need to be. And Meg, please feel free to chime in.
Yeah, real briefly, our role in pharmaceutical sciences and quality is working with manufacturing and labs to test all batches to make sure those vaccines are within our specifications that we've determined ensure the vaccine will work. So part of that testing and quality strategy is to conduct stability studies at various temperatures with representative lots made in various manufacturing locations globally, and understanding, how long in various conditions we can reliably assure quality. So you saw recently we allow longer standard freezer storage conditions. So we continue to evaluate those kind of conditions and make sure we're providing as much flexibility as we can, while assuring there's no chance that the vaccine would degrade to the point that it doesn't meet specification.
And then maybe a final question before we do a closing round robin, because we have about 5 minutes left. I want to make sure people can move to their next conference agenda and hear our closing announcements. Perhaps again to Meg or Roberto, we got a technical question that came in ahead of the program about technology. Can you speak to some of the types of bioreactors that are used in mass production, or some of the things that are unique and competitive that allowed us to move quickly with the development, test, and manufacture?
I can start. Actually, we don't use bioreactors in a way to produce the mRNA. It is more of a DNA template that becomes mRNA, and then you do the formulation to put these lipid nanoparticles, basically fat, around in a way that the mRNA doesn't get degraded and penetrates the cell and produce the antigen. Then all those technologies were new. We had to scale up in a way that we could produce the amount of vaccines we produce today. But those are, and I think James talked a lot about the ultra cold chain that was new to us as well. And I mean, if we're really going to talk about all the technology that has to be developed, I think Maggie can talk about the analytical technology to ensure quality and all of that. Then was really a lot of development take place, a lot of scale up take place in a very short period of time. Always with the quality and compliance in mind. Again, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think, from a pharmaceutical sciences, process development, and quality perspective, a lot of the technologies are things we were familiar with, but of course it's adapting those, especially maybe the lipid nanoparticle. We were new at making RNA, but we definitely have experience in gene therapies and plasmids, the template for the RNA. So we're able to leverage a lot of that existing technology. In the analytical space, we definitely had to acquire a lot of more of the genetic medicine kind of technologies, PCR-based things like that. And again, we had quite a bit of that. We just had to increase that capacity. So leveraging a lot of our existing knowledge, we have a lot of broad experience, but just really building up capacity to be able to do it much more in parallel and in many locations at once to maximize our success.
No, thank you. Now I'll do a quick kind of rapid fire to close us off. Just a couple of fun questions. It's no pressure. So this is just first thing that comes to mind, quick response. Meg, what's your favorite season?
Oh, fall for sure.
Fall. Roberto, is there a book that you're reading right now that you'd like to share, or anything that you're reading?
Yeah, I'm reading Ken Follett about the First World War. That's the book. I'm not reading anymore. I do audiobooks and I'm listening, actually.
Cool. Mona, what is your favorite color and does it show up in your wardrobe?
You may guess purple. I love purple, but I really love all colors. I appreciate colors. My whole house is all different rooms, different colors, blues, purples, grays, but long answer.
Not surprising as the DI lead. James, what would be your superpower?
Oh my God. My superpower, believe it or not, flying. I don't know why, but as a kid, I watched a lot of superheroes. Flying was just always something that I just always admire. So I'm one of those people who are always looking out the window in an aircraft, just because it's always just, an amazing feat that you're in a chair in the sky. I mean,
Nice. And then Sean, favorite hobby that might surprise people?
Ooh, that's a great question. That might surprise people. Yeah. I would say hiking.
Okay.
So let's go with hiking.
Nice. And last but not least, Dr. Dara, if you could build a university and share the knowledge and wisdom that you've gained over your career, what would some of the titles of the courses be that would be taught there?
Science, equity, and access.
Love it. Well, thank you. Awesome discussion. We have just one slide to close us out, and I think we're right on time. A couple of announcements about the future of our NSBE and Pfizer partnership. And I'll first lend the mic to Mona.
Unmute. All right. Yes. So we'll go through this rather quickly. But the first and most important thing we've heard consistently through all our speakers is be informed and engaged. As Dr. Dara Richardson said, get the facts from verified resources, read the whole story. Sometimes headlines can be very misleading. All right, and then the second piece, before you go into that, I'll end with my piece, the career fair booth. I posted in the chat. We have lots of career opportunities available across the U.S., outside of the U.S., in R&D, supply chain, manufacturing, and digital. And we need your diverse perspectives to develop these life-saving medicines at Pfizer and help us continue to build trust in communities of color. Arthur, on to you for the last messages.
Awesome. Thanks, Mona. Yeah, we're really excited about the Pfizer engagement and the program. And we have two surprise announcements. One, that NSBE will be partnering with the Multicultural Health Equity Collective, as mentioned and led by Melissa. And so in alignment with their mission, we'll be looking for opportunities for you to engage and really make an impact, taking action on some of the things that we discussed. So we dropped a link in the chat. And for anyone, whether you're in NSBE, not in NSBE, at Pfizer, not in Pfizer, who want to engage with us on that project, please let us know. And last but not least, in the area of talent and employee engagement, to any Pfizer employees on the call who might be interested in being an internal ambassador at the site where you work. We know many of you have renewed your membership or become new members. We'd like to engage with you and help to build that internal community in partnership with NSBE. Really, really excited about both of those. So, we thank you for your time. We know that it was a packed program, but we hope that you enjoyed it thoroughly. And we look forward to your feedback, seeing you at the career fair and other conference programs throughout the week. We have 2 more programs coming up at HiSig, and we will see you there. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.
Arthur, thanks for the facilitation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.